The tin cup clattered against the wooden floor as kestrel rainwater dropped it, her obsidian eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and something deeper, more primal. The lanky cowboy standing in her doorway froze mid-chew, a piece of cornbread still bulging in his cheek as he stared at the Apache woman whose daughter sat contentedly at his worn boots, licking honey from her small fingers. "You fed Singing Dove," Kestrel said, her voice carrying the weight of ancient mountains. "Without permission? Without asking?" Colt Maverick swallowed hard, the bread turning to sawdust in his throat. He'd been riding the range for 3 days. Straight, chasing rustlers through Devil's Canyon. When he'd stumbled upon the tiny girl sitting by Willow Creek, thin as a sapling and crying from hunger. She couldn't have been more than 6, with her mother's striking features and braids adorned with small feathers. He'd simply shared his provisions, jerky, cornbread, and precious honey he'd been saving for weeks. "Ma'am, she was hungry," he stammered, removing his hat to reveal sun-bleached hair. "Didn't think it was harm to harm?" Kestrel stepped closer, her deerskin dress whispering against the threshold. "You invoke the oldest law of my people, white man. The feeding bond. When a man feeds another's child without blood relation, he becomes responsible for that child's welfare and claims the mother as his own." Colt's weathered hands trembled slightly. He'd heard whispers of Apache customs in saloons, dismissed as tall tales by drunken cowhands. But the intensity in Kestrel's gaze, the way Singing Dove looked up at him with trusting brown eyes, made everything feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. "I don't understand, ma'am. I was just being kind." Her voice softened for a moment, catching him off guard, which makes this more complicated. She gestured toward her daughter, who had found Colt's leather saddlebags and was examining them with curiosity. "My husband died 2 summers ago. Cholera. Since then, no man has been permitted to feed Singing Dove. My grandmother, wise owl woman, told me the spirits would send the right one when the time came." The silence stretched between them like a taut rope. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its liquid song, and Colt could hear his horse stamping impatiently outside the small cabin Kestrel called home. "The right one for what?" he asked quietly. Kestrel's eyes never left his face. "To complete our family. To take responsibility for what you have started. The old ways are clear. You claimed her, and by extension, you claimed me." Colt felt the world tilt beneath his boots. He'd come to Broken Arrow territory to work cattle, maybe save enough to buy his own spread someday. Romance hadn't been on his mind, especially not with the stunning Apache woman who ran the trading post with fierce independence, who could track a deer through solid rock and shoot the center out of a silver dollar at 50 paces. But a Singing Dove toddled over and tugged at his chaps, her small voice piping up with more honey, please. Something shifted in his chest like tectonic plates. "Moving. What if I refuse?" he asked, though his heart was already answering. Kestrel smiled then, slow and dangerous as a summer storm. "Then you dishonor your own kindness, cowboy. And I hunt you to the ends of the earth to make you face what you've begun." 3 weeks later, Colt found himself chopping firewood behind Kestrel's cabin at dawn, sweat beading on his forehead despite the October chill. He tried to leave twice, once making it as far as Tombstone before turning his horse around, and another time reaching the territorial line before Singing Dove's laughter echoed in his memory, like a rope dragging him back. Kestrel emerged from the cabin, carrying 2 steaming cups of what she called warrior's coffee, strong enough to wake the dead and bitter as regret. She'd taken to preparing his morning drink without being asked, a gesture that felt both domestic and dangerous. "You're cutting the wood too small," she observed, settling onto the tree stump he'd been using as a seat. "Winter comes hard here. We need pieces thick as your forearm. Texas, we cut 'em thin so they catch fast," Colt replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Their fingers brushed as he took the cup, and he felt that familiar electric jolt that had been plaguing him since the day of the feeding bond. "This isn't Texas," her voice held amusement. "Here you need heat that lasts through nights, when the wind cuts like broken glass." He drank in comfortable silence while Singing Dove played with a family of carved wooden animals inside the cabin. The little girl had taken to calling him Honeyman, which never failed to make Kestrel's lips twitch with suppressed laughter. Tell me about this tradition, Colt said finally. Really tell me. Not just the part about claiming and responsibility. Kestrel studied him over the rim of her cup. You want the full story? Figure if I'm bound by it, I ought to understand. She nodded slowly. Long ago, when my people still followed the buffalo, there was a great famine. Children were dying, mothers grew thin as winter branches. A warrior from a neighboring tribe came upon our camp and saw our suffering. Without being asked, without expecting reward, he shared his provisions with our children, all of them, until his own pack was empty. Colt listened intently as her voice took on the cadence of oral tradition, musical and mesmerizing. Our chief's daughter was among those he fed. By our laws, this meant he had accepted responsibility for her welfare. But more than that, he had proven himself worthy of joining our family. The chief offered his daughter in marriage, not as payment, but as recognition of the man's character. They lived happily ever after? Colt asked wryly. Kestrel's laugh was like water over stones. They lived honestly ever after. Happiness. That takes work every day. A comfortable silence fell between them. Colt found himself watching the way morning light caught the copper threads in her long black hair, the graceful economy of her movements as she shifted on the stump. There's something else, Kestrel said quietly.
About the bond.
Once invoked, it cannot be broken by either party walking away. Only by mutual agreement or ... double quotes. She hesitated. Or what? Death. She met his eyes directly. The spirits take such bonds seriously. They believe two souls meant to be together will fight against separation, even unto death. Colt felt his heart skip like a stone on water. That's a hell of a thing to invoke over cornbread and honey. Yes, she agreed. It is. From inside the cabin came the sound of singing dove, singing a little song about horses and honey, her voice sweet as desert rain. No longer imagine mornings without that sound, without Kestrel's coffee burning away the night's cold, without the weight of responsibility that had somehow transformed into something deeper. Kestrel, he said carefully, what if I didn't want to break it? Her dark eyes searched his face for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was like sunrise over the canyon walls. The first snow fell in November, dusting the canyon walls like powdered sugar as Colt rode back from town with supplies. He'd officially moved his few belongings into Kestrel's spare room 2 days prior. After singing, Dove had developed a fever and cried inconsolably until he'd promised not to leave her side. As he approached the cabin, he could smell wood smoke and something delicious. Cooking venison stew. If his nose didn't deceive him, the domestic scene should have terrified him. 6 months ago, the idea of being tied down to one place, one woman, one responsibility, would have sent him galloping toward the horizon now. He found himself spurring his horse faster, eager to be home. Honey man, singing Dove burst from the cabin door as he dismounted, her fever broken and energy restored. She launched herself at his legs with the confidence of a child who had never been dropped. Easy there, little bird, he laughed, scooping her up. She'd grown in the weeks they'd been together, her face fuller, her laughter more frequent. Whatever doubts he'd harbored about the feeding bond, seeing her flourish under his care settled them permanently. Kestrel appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a cloth. How was town? Interesting, Colt replied, setting Singing Dove down. Seems there's been talk. Her expression grew guarded. What kind of talk? The kind where folks wonder why the Apache woman at the trading post is keeping company with a drifter cowboy? The kind where they start using words like improper and scandal. Kestrel's jaw tightened. She'd faced prejudice before, being Apache for being a woman, running her own business, for raising her daughter alone. But somehow, having it extended to include Colt made her blood burn hotter. What did you tell them? Colt pulled a small bundle from his saddlebags, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. I told them they could mind their own damn business. But I also figured it was time to make things official. He handed her the package, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Inside, nestled in white cotton, lay a ring knot. gold or silver, but turquoise and silver worked in a traditional Apache pattern, clearly crafted by tribal artisans. Quotes. Colt. She breathed. Now, before you say anything, he rushed on. I know this is backwards. I know the feeding bond already. Ties us together, and I know you could probably find a dozen good reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I want to marry you proper, Kestrel. Not just because of tradition or obligation, but because... He struggled for words, gesturing helplessly at the life they'd built together in such a short time, the easy mornings.
Ow.
The shared responsibilities. The way Singing Dove had brought them together while binding them into something stronger than either had imagined possible. Because I love you, he finished simply. Both of you. And I want the whole world to know you're mine, and I'm yours. Kestrel held the ring up to the light, watching it catch fire in the afternoon sun. You asked wise our woman to make this? Asked her what would be proper. She laughed at me for 10 minutes straight, then agreed to craft it. Said any man fool enough to invoke the feeding bond accidentally and then ask permission to marry afterward deserved her finest work. She's right, Kestrel said, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. You were a fool. Colt's heart sank until he saw her smile. But you're my fool now, completely and forever. She kissed him then, soft and sure, while Singing Dove clapped her hands and danced around them in circles, singing a song about rings and promises and honey-sweet futures. When they broke apart, Kestrel rested her forehead against his. The ceremony should be at winter's end, when the snows melt and the earth awakens. Wise owl woman insists on doing it properly, Apache traditions and white man's law both. That's months away, Colt protested. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Then you'd better get used to chopping firewood properly, cowboy. It's going to be a long, cold winter. But as he pulled her close and felt Singing Dove's small arms wrap around both their legs, Colt thought it might be the warmest winter of his life. February's bitter wind howled through the canyon like a living thing, rattling the cabin windows and piling snow against the door. Colt had been right about it being a long winter, but wrong about the warmth. The small space they shared had become a crucible, forging their hastily formed family into something unbreakable. Tell the story again, Singing Dove demanded from her nest of blankets by the fire, her dark eyes bright with fever. She'd caught a cold 3 days prior. And the only thing that seemed to comfort her was hearing about how Colt had first fed her by the creek. Which part, little bird? Kestrel asked, settling beside her daughter with a cup of willow bark tea. The part where Honeyman's eyes got big like a spooked horse when you told him about the bond? Colt chuckled from his chair where he was mending. Leather tack. My eyes did not get big. Did too. Singing Dove giggled weakly. And your face got red like sunset. That was sunburn, he protested, earning laughter from both his girls. Kestrel began the tale again. But this time she included details she'd never shared before, how her heart had raced when she'd seen him kneeling by her daughter. Oh, his gentleness with Singing Dove had reminded her of her late husband's tender moments. How terrified she'd been that he would reject the bond and disappear from their lives.
How were you scared, Mama?
Singing Dove asked drowsily. Terrified, Kestrel admitted, but sometimes the best things come from the scariest moments. As her daughter drifted to sleep, Kestrel moved to sit beside Colt. The past months had changed them both. He'd learned to braid Singing Dove's hair properly, to track game through snow, to understand the subtle language of Kestrel's moods. Discovered his dry humor, his unexpected skill with wood carving, the way he hummed old trail songs while working. Spring's coming, she said quietly, watching snow swirl past the window. I can smell it in the wind. Good Colt set aside his mending and pulled her closer. I'm ready to marry you properly, Mrs. Soon-to-Ba Maverick. She laughed softly. In Apache tradition, you would take my name. Colt Rainwater, he considered. It has a nice ring to it. We'll hyphenate, she decided. Rainwater Maverick. Something new for our new kind of family. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to Singing Doves, even breathing in the wind song. Tomorrow, Colt would ride to town for supplies and to check on the cattle he'd been hired to mind. Kestrel would tend the trading post and begin preparations for the spring planting. They were simply 3 people who had found each other against all odds, bound by honey and tradition, and something far deeper than either. "Colt," Kestrel said suddenly, "there's something I need to tell you about the wedding ceremony." His arms tightened around her. "What now?" "There's a test. A trial by fire, literally. To prove your commitment is true and your heart is pure." Colt groaned. "Of course there is. What do I have to do? Fight a bear? Swim a frozen river? Walk barefoot across hot coals while carrying burning sage?" She said factly. He was quiet for so long she began to worry. Then he started laughing deep. Genuine laughter that shook his whole body. "What's so funny?" "Darling," he managed between chuckles, "I've been walking on hot coals since the day I met you." A few burning embers seemed downright easy by comparison. Kestrel punched his arm playfully, but she was smiling too. Outside, the wind continued its wild song, but inside their cabin, warmth reigned supreme, not just from the fire, but from the love they'd built one day, one choice. One small act of kindness at a time, as they prepared for bed, singing Dove. Stirred and mumbled sleepily, "Will there be honey at the wedding?" "All the honey you can eat, little bird," Colt promised. "Good," she sighed contentedly. "Honey makes everything better." And as Kestrel and Colt exchanged a look over her small form, they realized she was absolutely right. March arrived with the rush of melting snow and the return of meadowlarks to the canyon. Kestrel stood before the mirror in her cabin, adjusting the traditional Apache wedding dress wise owl woman had crafted for the ceremony. The white deerskin was adorned with intricate beadwork in turquoise and coral, and small silver bells that chimed softly with each movement. "You look like a spirit maiden," singing Dove declared from the bed, where she sat in her own miniature version of the dress, complete with a tiny flower crown. "And you look like trouble," Kestrel replied, though her voice was warm with affection. Her daughter had fully recovered from winter's illness and seemed determined to make up for lost energy. Outside, she could hear the sounds of preparation. Tribal members from the nearby reservation had come to witness the ceremony, along with a few townspeople who had grown to respect the unlikely family. "Wise Owl." Woman's commanding voice carried over the others as she directed the arrangement of the sacred fire circle. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Kestrel. "It's time." She opened the door to find her grandmother-in-law, resplendent in ceremonial regalia, her ancient eyes twinkling with mischief and wisdom. "Is he ready?" Kestrel asked. "As ready as any man can be for walking on fire," Wise Owl woman cackled. "He's been practicing with cold stones all morning. Your cowboy learns quickly." They walked together toward the ceremony site, singing Dove, dancing ahead of them, scattering flower petals from her basket. The gathering was small but meaningful. Perhaps 30 people arranged in a circle around the sacred fire pit that had been prepared. With special woods and blessed herbs, Colt stood at the eastern edge of the circle, magnificent in buckskins that had been gifted by the tribal council. His hair, grown longer over the winter months, was pulled back with a leather cord, and traditional Apache jewelry adorned his neck and wrists. But it was his eyes that took Kestrel's breath away, steady, determined, and full of love as they found hers across the circle. Wise Owl. Woman began the ceremony with ancient songs that seemed to make the very air shimmer. She spoke in Apache first, then English, telling the story of the feeding bond and how the spirits had guided these two souls together. "Marriage," she intoned, "is not just the joining of two people, but the weaving of two life paths into one stronger cord."
Oh.
Colt Maverick proves his worthiness not through conquest or wealth, but through courage and commitment. The coals had been prepared to a glowing red heat. As Colt approached the fire pit, a hush fell over the gathered witnesses. He carried a bundle of burning sage in each hand, and his face was set with fierce concentration. "Think of love, not fire," Wise Owl woman whispered to him. "Think of your daughter's laughter, your woman's smile. Let that carry you across." Colt nodded once, closed his eyes for a moment, then stepped onto the coals. The first step was agony. Second sent shock. waves through his entire body, but by the third, something magical happened. The pain transformed into purpose. He could hear singing, Dove cheering, could sense Kestrel's presence like a beacon drawing him forward. His feet moved faster now, dancing across the coals with surprising grace. When he reached the other side, the gathered crowd erupted in celebration. His feet were unmarked, protected by faith and love and the sacred power that flowed through ancient rituals. Kestrel ran to him then. Tradition temporarily forgotten as she threw her arms around his neck. The sage bundles had been passed to wise owl woman, who used them to bless their union while the couple kissed deeply, surrounded by cheers and the sound of traditional drums that had begun to play. Now you are truly bound, wise owl woman declared. As they broke apart, by law, by tradition, by fire, and by choice. What the spirits have joined, let no earthly power divide. The celebration continued late into the night, with feasting and dancing and stories shared around the fire. As the moon rose full and bright, Colt and Kestrel slipped away to the edge of the gathering, their hands intertwined. "Any regrets, Mrs. Rainwater Maverick?" he asked softly. "Only one," she replied, and his heart skipped before she continued. "I wish I could have fed you that first day instead, just to see your reaction to being claimed by Apache tradition." His laughter carried across the canyon, mixing with the sounds of celebration and the eternal song of the wind through the rocks. 1 year later, autumn painted the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson as Kestrel emerged from the cabin, her hand pressed to her rounded belly. At 6 months pregnant, she moved with the careful grace of a woman carrying precious cargo. While singing Dove now 7 and fierce as her mother helped with the morning chores, Colt's taking too long with the supplies, singing Dove observed, standing on her tiptoes to peer down the trail that led to town. "He'll be back before sunset," Kestrel assured her, though she found herself watching the horizon with equal concern. Her husband had left at dawn for Broken Arrow, intending to collect winter provisions and check on a potential cattle contract that could secure their growing family's financial future. The trading post had prospered under their joint management. Kestrel's knowledge of tribal needs, combined with Colt's understanding of cowboy and settler requirements, had created a thriving business. They'd expanded the cabin, adding a proper storeroom and a nursery that Colt had crafted with his own hands. "Mama, what if the baby doesn't like honey?" Singing Dove asked seriously, settling beside Kestrel on the porch swing Colt had built. "What makes you think that?" Kestrel laughed, shifting to accommodate her daughter's head on her shoulder. "Well, you and Colt fell in love because of honey, and I liked honey, so he fed it to me. But what if this baby is different?" Kestrel considered, the question with the gravity it deserved. "Then we'll find out what the baby does like, and we'll love them just the same, even if it's something weird like pickled beets. Even pickled beets." They sat in comfortable silence, watching clouds drift across the vast sky. The baby kicked strongly, as if responding to their voices, and Kestrel smiled. This child had been conceived in love, not obligation, and would grow up knowing nothing but security and belonging. Hoofbeats echoed from the canyon walls, and both mother and daughter sat up straight. But the approaching rider wasn't Colt, it was young Running Wolf from the reservation, his horse lathered with sweat and his face grim with urgency. "Kestrel," he called as he dismounted. "There's been trouble in town, a fight at the saloon. Colt's hurt, but alive. Doc Fleming's tending him at the jail." The world tilted beneath Kestrel's feet. How badly hurt? Knife wound to the shoulder, some bruising. He got jumped by 3 mints. Something about not liking Indians or Indian lovers. But he held his own until the sheriff arrived. Kestrel was already moving, her pregnancy forgotten in the face of crisis. Singing Dove, "Pack our medical kit." "Running Wolf, can you harness the wagon?" "Already done," the young man replied. "Figured you'd want to go to him fast." The journey to town felt endless, though it took less than 2 hours. Singing Dove held her mother's hand tightly, both of them silent with worry. When they finally arrived at the sheriff's office, they found Colt sitting up on a cot, his left arm in a sling but very much alive. "Before you say anything," he began as Kestrel rushed to his side, "they look much worse than I do. Colt Rainwater Maverick, You scared us half to death." She examined his bandaged shoulder with gentle fingers. Her medical training taking over. What happened? Sheriff Martinez, a grizzled man who'd grown to respect the mixed family, spoke up. "Three drifters started trouble when they saw Colt buying baby clothes. Said some things that shouldn't be repeated in front of ladies. Your husband tried to walk away peaceful-like, but they followed him outside." And Kestrel prompted checking Colt's pupils for signs of concussion. "And apparently nobody ever taught them that Apache women don't marry weak men," the sheriff chuckled. "Colt put 2 of them down before the third got lucky with a knife. By the time I arrived, it was over." Singing Dove had climbed onto the cot and was examining her stepfather's bruises with serious concern. "Does it hurt bad, honeyman?" "Not as bad as your mom is going to hurt me for getting in a fight," Colt replied, earning a gentle swat from Kestrel. "The baby clothes are safe," he added quickly. "Had to protect the important stuff." Despite her worry, Kestrel felt tears of laughter prick her eyes. Even wounded, even facing prejudice and violence, her husband's priorities remained exactly where they should be with their family. "We're going home," she decided. "Doc Fleming says you can travel if you promise to rest." "Yes, ma'am," Colt agreed meekly. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Martinez pulled Kestrel aside. "Those men won't be bothering anyone for a while. They're facing charges for assault and disturbing the peace. But you might want to be extra careful for a while. Word is there's others who don't approve of mixed families." Kestrel's hand moved protectively to her belly. "Let them come. We survived the feeding bond, a fire walk, and a frontier winter. We can handle anything else life throws at us." And as they drove home together, wounded but whole, CHALLENGED, but unbroken, she truly believed it. 5 years had passed since that violent encounter in town, and the Rainwater Maverick family had not just survived, but flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Colt stood in the doorway of their expanded home, watching his wife tend to their vegetable garden while their son, 4-year-old Storm, helped by digging enthusiastic holes in random locations. Singing Dove, now 12 and every inch her mother's daughter, was teaching Storm the proper way to plant corn seeds. At 9 months pregnant with their third child, Kestrel moved slowly but purposefully, her hands gentle with both plants and children. "Papa, look what I found," Storm called out, holding up a smooth river stone that glinted in the afternoon sun. "That's a good one, son," Colt replied, settling on the porch steps. His shoulders still ached in cold weather, a permanent reminder of that day in town. But it was a small price for the lesson it had taught the community. The Rainwater Mavericks were not to be trifled with. The trading post had grown into the most successful business in 3 counties. What had started as a small cabin operation now employed 6 people and served customers from as far away as Santa Fe. More importantly, it had become a symbol of harmony between cultures, proof that cooperation bred prosperity. "Colt," Kestrel called softly. "I think it's time." He was on his feet instantly, recognizing the tone in her voice. Their second child had arrived so quickly there had barely been time to boil water. This one seemed determined to follow the same pattern. "Singing Dove," he called, "take Storm to Wise Owl Woman's house. Tell her the baby's coming." The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Wise Owl Woman arrived with her birthing kit and her reassuring presence. Colt paced the porch, listening to the sounds from within Kestrel's controlled breathing, the older woman's encouraging murmurs, and finally, the first cry of new life. "It's a girl," Wise Owl Woman announced, opening the door with a smile that could have powered the town's new electric lights. Strong as her mother and stubborn as her father. Colt entered the bedroom to find Kestrel cradling a tiny bundle, her face radiant with exhaustion and joy. The baby had a cap of dark hair and lungs that announced her displeasure with the world in no uncertain terms. "Have you chosen a name?" Wise Owl Woman asked as Singing Dove and Storm were permitted to meet their new sister. "El honey," Kestrel said, simply looking up at her husband with dancing eyes. "We're calling her Honey." Colt threw back his head and laughed, deep, joyous laughter that filled the room and spilled out into the canyon beyond. "Of course we are. It's only fitting." As evening approached and their guests departed, the family settled into the quiet intimacy of new beginnings. A storm had fallen asleep curled against his father's side, while Singing Dove helped her mother. With the baby's first feeding, do you think she'll invoke any ancient traditions when she grows up? Singing Dove asked thoughtfully. She'll probably invent new ones, Colt replied. Earning a gentle laugh from his wife, Kestrel gazed down at baby Honey, who had finally stopped crying and was studying the world with serious dark eyes. I think she's going to be our wildest adventure yet. Looking forward to it, Colt murmured, pulling his family closer. Outside, first stars appeared in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its liquid song. The canyon walls stood eternal and unchanging, but within their embrace, love had created something entirely new, family bound not by blood alone, but by choice, courage, and the ancient magic of feeding the hungry. Years later, when people would ask Colt about the secret to their happiness, he would always give the same answer. Sometimes the best things in life start with the simplest acts of kindness. You just have to be brave enough to accept the consequences. And if pressed for details, he would add with a grin, never underestimate the power of good honey and a hungry child. They'll change your whole world if you let them. As the moon rose full and bright over their canyon home, illuminating a family that defied convention and thrived on love, the wind carried whispers of ancient blessings and new traditions being born. The feeding bond had created more than a marriage, it had woven together to cultures, 3 generations, and countless possibilities into something beautiful, lasting, and sweet as desert honey. The story of how Colt Maverick accidentally invoked an Apache tradition would be told and retold around fires for generations to come. But the happiness it created would endure much longer than any tale as real and eternal as love itself.